Hey, I don't know if you like sports. Do you like sports? Yay, nay. Some people say they don't like sports, but then they play golf, and I mean, no, there's loads of sports in life, right? Yeah. I remember when I first came to the UK and I tried to play cricket, having grown up playing baseball. I used to teach baseball to children. I was no good as a player, so they put you as one of those like assistant coaches, don't they? I think they do that here in the football world as well, don't they? Anyway, so yeah, you should see me trying to bowl. I can't throw a ball without bending my arm. And if I stand at the wickets, you just have to imagine, if you remember baseball, now when you play baseball, you pull back, don't you, and you lift the bat up. Well, in cricket, that's the dumbest thing to do, isn't it? So I'm standing there and I'm like this, and you just expose the wickets. So after trying bowling, I got kicked off. After trying batting, I got kicked off, and they just put me in the field somewhere else. So yeah, no, cricket wasn't my game, but I'm sure you guys like watching 5 days of the same thing with no winners. Okay, I'm really there. I mean, just sign me up now. So yeah, and I mean, sports are huge around the world. They say that there's like 8,000 different officially recognized sports in the world, which is kind of cool. It's crazy. I mean, sports have been going on. They've got sports evidence of actually organized athletic games that have gone on for thousands of years. The ancient Mayans, all around the world, there's people groups that they found evidence of ancient sports in games. It's pretty cool. Sports has gone on for a long time. And obviously in the UK, there's a number of sports that pick up and are popular, and it changes over. The popularity of sports changes. So, for example, a couple years ago, when Emma Raducanu won the U.S. Open. She won the U.S. Open a couple of years ago. Do you remember? Now, the uptake in terms of girls and women doing tennis, went up. The same thing happened when the Lionesses won the Euros. So as seasons change, as culture changes as well. So at the moment, there's a huge resurgence, if you like, or more females signing up to play football. It's becoming more and more popular here. So, as seasons sort of change, but football is still the dominating number one sport in the UK. It has in terms of participation, it's got the most participants. I wonder, what's your favorite sport? Maybe tell somebody beside you, what sport are you into? Is it football? Cycling? Are you a golfer? What's your favorite sport? If you're watching online, maybe put a comment on there. Let us know what your favorite sport is. What's your favorite sport? I like this one called couch surfing. Oh man, I'm like one of the national champions, so I'm really there. Occasionally I have to get up and get something. Used to be able to get to the kitchen and back during the adverts. Now that's just a thing of the past, so I just have to press pause, and I can take however long I want, and then I come back and I press play, and my show carries on, right? No, I don't know what sport you play, but there's lots of sports in the UK, and you might have twigged what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about something to do with athletics and sports and stuff, and for people that are at the top of their game, these sort of like top athletes, it didn't happen overnight. Even if they were born with a natural skill and natural ability, they still had to sort of strive and work really hard at it. We've currently got the Wimbledon finals are going on. Any Czech people in the room very happy about the results? So we've got another final today, of course. But there's lots going on at the moment. But these people have trained for years and years and years, and they've worked, really hard. And there's something about there's a story that takes place in the Bible which actually uses the same sort of illustration. There's this guy named Paul, and we've got a picture from his socials. There he is. That's his profile picture on Insta. You can follow him. He's at The Real Apostle, so you can find him online. And so he's writing to a friend of his, or more like a protege, and he's writing to pass the baton, to carry on with the sports language. He's going to pass the baton on to this other lad that he's working with. His name is Timothy. And Timothy was Paul's kind of, protege, Timothy looked up to Paul like a mentor, and Paul traveled all around the Mediterranean, planting churches, leading churches, and Timothy was one of the guys that he was pouring into to carry on because, hey, we're all not going to be here forever. And if we don't invest in the next generation, then no matter how successful or how good or how wonderful the things that we've done are, they'll die with us. And Paul knows that. You know, he knows that there's a point of giving your life to something, and it's not going to stay with him. It needs to be passed on, to go on to somebody else. And this guy Timothy is who he's really pouring into and passing his wisdom and passing the baton. Because Paul's in chains. Paul knows at this point when he's writing this letter to Timothy that he's at the end of his life. He's reaching the end. Now we've got a whole bunch of letters that Paul wrote, and they're collected, and they're part of what we call the Bible. So if you don't know what the Bible is, the best way to think about the Bible is a library. And it's just like any library that you go to where you see different types of books and different sections. The Bible is like that as well. It's 66 different books that have been put together. There's history books, there's poetry, there's apocalyptic, there's biographical. There's a whole bunch of different types of books put into one book, the Bible. And Paul wrote loads of different letters to lots of different churches as he was helping lead them and help them get started, and they asked him questions. And so some of the things that he wrote, we have copies of. We've got these letters that have been preserved, and these letters, these have been added into the book, which we call the Bible, or added into the library called the Bible. And this letter is, out of all of the ones that Paul wrote, his most personal and his most intimate. And he's writing this letter to Timothy, and the way he starts this discussion with Timothy, he says to Timothy, he says, "My son." He's like, "Come on, my son, He says, "Son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus." And he's really encouraging him here. This is in the second chapter. The first chapter, he's just been saying about Timothy to really go for it and to not be ashamed and to not be frightened and to go for the gift that's in you and all these kind of things. He's really personal. And then he carries on. He says, "Join with me in the suffering like a soldier. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but rather works to please their commanding officer. Also, anyone who competes as an athlete does not receive the prize except by competing according to the rules, and the hard-working farmer should be first to receive a share of the crops." Paul is giving Timothy 3 metaphors, 3 pictures, 3 things that he can hold on to so he can give his life to something and know how to carry on when life is tough. How do you keep going? How do you You missed the cue. It's supposed to be after the joke. No. So how do you carry on when life is tough, when things are going? And so Paul's writing to Timothy to help him understand that whatever he faces in the future, he's got these 3 pictures that he can remember, that he can revert to. Now, the interesting thing about this is, of course, if we looked at the definitions of these words, so you got suffering soldier, competing athlete, hard-working farmer. In the original language, in the Greek, this is what the words themselves mean. So you got suffering is to face hardship, trouble, endure affliction. Competing is to endure, engage, contend, to suffer. Hard-working, to grow weary and tired from your labor, to be exhausted with toil or grief. Not really the most if you're thinking about becoming a Christian, there you go. You want 3 reasons why not to do it? There you go, right? I mean, these are not the most attractive options. Suffering, competing, hardworking. It's Paul's given these pictures to Timothy, and he's writing these things which are even more challenging when we realize Paul's not a soldier or an athlete or a farmer. Timothy's not a soldier, an athlete, or a farmer. The context that Paul is writing in is local church. He's writing to Timothy. He's not writing to Timothy about his marriage, or he's not writing to Timothy about his work. He's not writing to Timothy necessarily about the sort of assignments he's got, or maybe his parenting, or maybe his college program that he's trying to study for. And all of these things are applicable. You can apply that stuff to those situations, of course. Because if you're working on your degree, there's going to be moments when you're working on some stuff, and you know what? At times you're going to be suffering, competing, and hard working. Sometimes it is a bit of hard work. And maybe you know this because you're experiencing that right now. Maybe it's in your workplace. Sometimes in your workplace, things are suffering, competing, and hard working. Maybe in your relationships, you've got a relationship with someone. Sometimes it's not always easy. They say the honeymoon period doesn't last. Okay? I've been married 25 years, and supposedly it doesn't last, but no, trust me, it doesn't carry on forever, okay? But and if you've got children, for sure the hardest thing about being a parent is the children. But anyway, sometimes it's hard work, whatever. So you can apply it to your lives. But the context is local church. Paul's writing to Timothy about the local church. Now, if you're just exploring faith and you're thinking about things, this is really cool that you're here today, because the benefit of this is following Jesus is should be the most honest and most transparent belief system in the world. You can ask questions, you can have doubts, you can wrestle with what you believe, and you know what it costs up front. It should never feel like you've been conned into something. It should be clear up front. And this is really helpful because, hey, it's not all roses and butterflies and tiptoeing unicorns and stuff. Life isn't always gold at the end of a rainbow. Sometimes life, and you know this because you're a human being, this. Sometimes life is a bit more like suffering, competing, and hard working. And it's the same when you follow Jesus. It doesn't stop. It doesn't just go away all of a sudden. So that's really cool, especially if you're exploring faith and wondering about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. You get to know what it costs up front. So it's really, really cool. And he's writing about the local church. Paul's saying to Timothy, if you're going to take it seriously, you got to remember, sometimes it's being like a suffering soldier, a competing athlete, and a hard-working farmer. You got to just keep going. But when we think of the local church, we don't really like to use any of those adjectives, do we? We don't like the idea of it being suffering, competing, or hard work either. We just don't like that. And we don't like it not because it's church, we don't like it because it's life. We don't like it when it's tough in life. We don't like it when it's things demanding on us. And there's, like it or not, sociologists say there's a gap in the people of a certain generation who understand what hard work is. And the idea is there's been a generation raised on entitlement, and they've forgotten what it means to work hard for something. And so this isn't we don't like those words just because it's to do with church. We don't like those words because it's to do with life, and we don't like when life is suffering or hardworking or feeling like competing. We just don't like those words anyway, in general. And last thing we want to do is want church to be like that. We don't like it in life, so why would we like it in church, right? But Paul's saying to him, this is how you will know to keep going when the going gets tough. If you understand that sometimes life is like being a soldier, an athlete, or a farmer, this is how you are going to be able to keep going. Stay focused. How do you stay focused when the going gets tough? A soldier, an athlete, and a farmer, every single one of them have a focus. They're not just random things, Every one of these things has focus. How do you stay focused with what you're doing in the context of local church? But of course, it applies to life. But how do you stay focused when the going gets tough? Because just because something gets tough, and it will, doesn't mean you walk away. Just because something becomes uncomfortable doesn't mean we give up. Just because it requires more of us doesn't mean we give up. Now, this is true because if you've ever had a baby or little one in your life, and they wake you up at 2 a.m. every single night forever, feels like, and you might feel like you want to give up, but you don't give up. You push through. Maybe you get a new dog, a new puppy, and that puppy does the same thing as a newborn baby. It whines and it wets the floor and it pees every time in the wrong places, and punami they call it, don't they? Anyway, these things happen. These things happen, and you don't give up. You don't just you don't just throw the baby away or throw the dog away, You get a new one, you trade them in. Yeah, we kept trying to improve our model. After 4, I thought, well, I should have stopped with the first one. It was amazing. But anyway, no. But you see, you know this in life, yeah? Sometimes life is going to be things that we have to just keep going when the going gets tough. And this is how we have a purposeful pursuit in life. Now, we said this last week. This was part 2 of a 3-part series. We said this last week. So these 3 weeks are going to be a bit challenging because we're going to be looking at this filter of the local church. And we're going to be using some stuff to talk about the local church, which isn't what we always talk about necessarily. So it's a little bit different than what we normally do, but it's still important because it's part of the overall, it's the part of the whole package, if you like. So we're going to be talking about some stuff that might be a little bit challenging, might be a little bit awkward, might be a little bit personal, because actually, you know what? Following Jesus is just like deodorant. It doesn't do you any good unless you put it on. Okay? You got to apply it or it doesn't work. Okay? Deodorant is amazing. There's so many different options and colors and smells and all sorts. And you could buy 100 different varieties today, organic and eco-friendly and whatever, 72-hour prevention. You can buy the stuff that turns you into a lizard for the next week. Okay? But it doesn't do you any good unless you do something with it. It's the same thing with like following Jesus. So this stuff is going to be practical and you have to apply it, which means it's going to be challenging because you kind of got to do something with it to make it really work in your life. And the encouraging thing is sometimes it's suffering and competing and hard working. So there you go. And if you don't like what you hear today, we're talking about it again next week. So just miss next week as well. And then we're on a summer break for 2 weeks. So come back in the middle of August when we're back to like doing fun and games and summer stuff that we got planned for you. But you've been warned. So last week we looked at a soldier and asking the question, what are you fighting for? Because we are all fighting for something. Whatever it is, what wakes you up? What gets you going in the morning? What is it you want to see change? What are you fighting for? And today we're looking at that second picture of the competing athlete and asking the question, what are you training for? What are you in training for? And that's the sort of a question we want to look at today. We jump back into that verse that we just read a second ago where Paul said to Timothy, he said, compete, yeah? Nobody competes. Anyone who competes like an athlete doesn't receive the prize except by competing according to the rules. So let's just dig in to that. I mean, first thing that stands out to me is the word compete. Anyone who competes. You think like, well, hang on a minute. Is Paul saying like we're supposed to be competing against one another in church? Or should we like be competing against other churches? So should we be like, trying to just nick people from other churches and be the best churches? Wait, I got it. I got a new program for our fuse groups, which is what we call our small groups. So our fuse groups, it's meeting homes throughout the week to just grow in life and faith and friendship. I've got a great idea. So this year, let's see who can be the best fuse group, right? So you guys can like have little competitions amongst one another and, and maybe who brings the best cakes or who has the best discussion or who has the most fun or who's the most serious and who reads the most old, obscure Bible texts. I mean, come on, like we could find different ways and we could tot it up and in 12 months' time, we can give somebody a badge for being the best fuse group at New Life Church, right? We got to compete with one another, I don't really think Paul is saying that. He's not saying you compete with one another in that sense. How do we know he's not saying that? Because when you read Paul's other letters and the stuff he writes about the local church, he writes about working together, collaboration, unity, you're the body. He uses pictures all the time which talk about collaboration, not competition. So he's not saying we compete against one another in that sense. Whew. But I will say, whatever we do, we want to do the best that we can. It's not an excuse to like be mediocre. So we do want to do whatever we can to the best of our abilities with whatever budget and time constraints, whatever we got. So we're still going to go for the best that we can do with what we've got. But we're not doing it to be one up on somebody else. We're doing it to be faithful to what we've got, which is to do the best with what we've got. Okay, so it doesn't mean competing sort of in that sense, So I kind of think, well, what is it? What does it mean? What is he saying? What is he really kind of telling Timothy? I think what he's telling Timothy is you need to think and behave like an athlete. So what can we learn from that if we think of it that way? Sort of how do you think and behave like an athlete? And so I just sort of let my mind go for a bit and sort of wander on a few things. And an athlete wears small shorts. So, okay, there's some things we can apply from athleticism that probably isn't what Paul was talking about. Okay, you're glad to know that, aren't you? Yes, you are. So, so these aren't the only things we can apply from being an athlete, but these are just the three things that kind of came to my mind. And the first thing that struck me about being an athlete, because talking about competing as an athlete, is an athlete will train hard, even when it's inconvenient. The top of the game athletes do it over and over and over and over and over again. They train hard. And even though they're born with natural skills, like we said at the beginning, and natural abilities, ability to do what they want to do, they still have to work at their natural abilities. It's not a given, and the more you work in athletics, the higher you go, the smaller the field goes, isn't it? And the more commitment it's going to cost, and the more time it's going to cost. And I want to tell you about somebody who plays for the world's greatest football team, and he used to play for the world's greatest football team. So my father-in-law was a PE teacher in Salford. And their field backed onto the back of the Manchester United training ground. Now, if you're counting things today, you want to count how many times I say Manchester United, because Manchester United are the world's greatest football team. Just wait until they actually start winning again, and then you'll be really sick of me saying Manchester United. But anyway, they've got a vacancy for a keeper if anybody wants it. So their training pitch at my father-in-law's school, if you like, the pitch, backed onto one of the academy grounds for Manchester United. And so my father-in-law tells a story about sitting there, and he could see this little boy who would be there at training, and then he would stay there at the end of training, and he'd have one of those net bags. If you've played football with little, they got these massive sort of net bags just full of footballs. They had a massive bag full of footballs. And he'd put the football down, take a free kick. Put a football down, take a free kick. Put a football down, take a free kick. For those of you who don't know what a free kick is, it means it doesn't cost you any money to kick anything. No, it just means you get to put the ball down and the player backs up and they runs for it and kicks the ball with everybody having to wait and give them space. So you kick a ball when it's stationary. And this kid was there. And my father-in-law tells a story, seeing this young lad out there taking these free kicks. He'd do it when it was cold. He'd do it when it was rainy. He did it when it was hot. He'd show up before training and he'd stay after training. He did it for hours and hours and hours every day. And my father-in-law could see it because my father-in-law was head of PE and ran the PE department at the school. And they would see this kid playing football, and they asked somebody who it was. And this boy's name was David Beckham, still regarded as one of the greatest free kickers, at least in England, that we've ever had. Whether or not one of the greatest free kickers. And he said this one time when he was interviewed, he said, I must have taken hundreds of thousands of free kicks as a child. And he says this time, he says about where he would go to the local park and he'd put the ball on the ground and he'd aim for this little wire window on the side of a community center. Those kids would just kick a ball against a wall. And that's what he did until he became older and got signed. And it takes commitment even when it's inconvenient. You train hard. And an athlete wakes up early. An athlete changes their schedule. An athlete changes their diet. An athlete thinks differently. An athlete seizes the moment. An athlete endures the pain. An athlete sacrifices. They create new habits. When the old ones aren't working, they change habits again. They give everything. They overcome their injury, and an athlete turns belief into action. They can't just sit up there and think about taking free kicks. They take free kicks over and over and over and over. And an athlete trains hard even when it's inconvenient. And the benefit doesn't come easy. And the victory is fought for. You have to train hard. You work, you discipline, and your victory comes at a cost. And eventually, David Beckham reaped the reward of the faithfulness of working. And being a little lad who wasn't signed by anybody, wasn't making any money from anybody, no sponsors, no fancy stuff, no famous wife. He just was a little boy in a pitch, kicking a ball thousands and thousands of times. And now he's regarded as one of the top 5 free kickers ever to play football in the world. Still the best one in England, but he's still classed as the highest, one of the top 5 globally. So he worked hard, yeah. I taught him everything he knows. No, just kidding. But if we're honest, we want the easy way out. We do want the easy way out, you know. It's so inconvenient that I don't want to keep working at this, keep going at it. And we do want the easy way out, you know, things that just annoy us and get in our way. And especially if I start thinking of the filter of the local church, it's easier to not serve. It's easier to not try to get stuck in. It's easier to sort of be frustrated when it feels like I can't see any reward or see any benefit. You know, it's easy to say, you know, I'm down. You know, I'm hanging my boots up. You know, I'm done. And maybe you've been in that position, or maybe you are in that position, you know, and I'm sorry for whatever. And of course, I'm not wanting to simplify a reason that you're down tools. I'm saying one aspect could be that sometimes we don't push through the inconvenient factor. Possibly. Okay, there's other reasons, of course. You might have had life circumstances and things changed in your life. So please don't feel guilty. You've got to apply what we're talking about to where you're at today. But it's, you know, it's human nature. It's easier to spend money than budget. Right? It's easier to spend money rather than stick to a budget. It's easier to be undisciplined than disciplined. That's just the way human nature works. Okay? You know? But things are hard work. So let's compete and train. An athlete knows that training is hard work and the benefit doesn't come easy. So the next one we're looking at, an athlete keeps going even when they don't yet see the results. An athlete will keep going. Paul is telling Timothy, keep going. Keep going. Okay, sometimes this is going to be hard work, it's going to be inconvenient, but keep giving. Don't give up. Paul writes elsewhere, you know, you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. Don't give up. Keep going. Keep going. And an athlete will keep going before they see the results. Because they're training, aren't they? They're competing for the thing to come. Because when they finally reach the final of Wimbledon, they want to be able to win. They train for what they haven't yet seen. They train for that which they can only imagine. That which is on the horizon, that which isn't yet. And they train, they go so hard and don't give up even when they don't see the results. And Paul's talking about this, and I told you this letter is really personal. And Paul, just before this, he actually writes about something. He writes about other people who've given up. And in 2 Timothy chapter 1, he talks about people who are ashamed of him because he's in chains. They don't understand why this is all going on. And he actually writes this to Timothy. He says, guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you. Guard it with the help of the Holy Spirit who lives in us. And you know that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me, including those two guys or ladies, Pegulus and Hermogenes. I don't know. P and H. Right? Write those down in case you need some baby names, right? You're thinking like, wonder what we should call our next one. There you go. Some good suggestions there. So, this is a personal letter. Paul's like naming two people that have actually deserted him and left him and walked away. So he's saying, hey, Timothy, guard it. Don't you do the same thing. Don't you do the same thing that they've done. Keep going. A competing athlete trains hard even when they don't yet see the results. They keep going. They keep going. And for us to keep going, it takes commitment and consistency. Commitment and consistency. You got to choose to start, and you got to choose to keep going. You need both of those things in life. Whatever you do, you know, if you're going to do something, choose to start it, and then Choose to keep doing it. Choose to do it and choose to commit. Go for it. You will reap in time. You will reap the benefit of good decisions. Make a commitment, make a good decision, and then stick with it. Even when it's hard, stick with it when you don't see the results. This is what he's saying to Timothy. You got to keep going. You got to stick with it. I mean, just imagine somebody joins a rugby club, but they never go to training. Yeah? Or as soon as the weather's a bit iffy, they don't go to play. It's not really like commitment here. I mean, you might have chosen to do it, but you're not very consistent. You're not really going to develop as an athlete. Okay, you join the swimming team or whatever. You join the gym, right? You know what I mean? Just because you've got a gym membership doesn't mean you've ever set foot in the gym. Yeah? Usually 6 weeks after January, gym visits fall through the floor, don't they, statistically? Everybody joins the gym in January. 6 weeks later, 34% of people are still going. There's a massive drop-off, right? Commitment and consistency. We got to commit, and we have to be consistent. And even when we don't see the results yet. So if I think about, okay, now we're going to be local church, right? So local church, I want to see people's lives totally changed by the love of Jesus. I want to see people have their lives changed every single time we gather. I want to see it so much more than I actually see it. Maybe you're happy with the level of what we see. I want to see it more than what we see it. I want to see lives changed every single time we gather. In our small groups, in our gatherings like this, I want to see people's lives changed. And I can either get discouraged because it's not happening as quick or happening as often, and then I can think, what's the point? Or I can say, I'm going to be an athlete who doesn't give up, even though I don't see the results. Because I know there's 34,000 people that live in Letchworth, give or take 2 or 3. There's 34,000 people that live in Letchworth. There's plenty of people for every single one of the local churches in our town to be bursting at their seams with lives that have been changed. The fields are ripe for harvest. I want to see people discover how much Jesus loves them, how much he gave his life for them, how much he wants to see them better. That's what I want to see. I want to see something that I want to see more than what I see now. I am greedy. I don't want to settle for one life changed or 2 lives. I mean, what's enough for you? 1 of your family members, 2 of your family members, 3 of your family members? Okay, what's the upper limit for you? How many do you want to see? Church is not about numbers. Church is about people whose lives have not yet discovered Jesus. And that means if he trusts us to give us 10 more people, we're going to do our best. If he gives us 100 more people, we do it with 100. 1,000, 10,000. Screw the numbers. It's not about the size of the church. It's about people's hearts. That's what we're after. And so we're reaching for something that we don't yet see happen. But like an athlete, I'm not going to give up because I don't see the result. Like an athlete, we have to keep training for that which we don't yet see. And therefore, if you're in the superstars, if you're investing in our next generation, you commit and you're consistent. You say, I'm on that team, and you show up, darn it. And you know those kids' names, and you find out what's going on in their lives because you're going to be committed and you're going to be consistent. If you're investing in our youth, sorry, I'm getting loud. If you're investing in our youth, if you're investing in the next generation, you commit and you're consistent. Don't give up on them. Just because you don't see the change as quickly as you want to see it, somebody didn't give up on you. Somebody didn't give up on me, scrawny little white kid in a church growing up that somebody believed in and didn't give up on in spite of the decades of mistakes. All right, we could sit down and spend the next 7 years talking about all the screw-ups. Man, someone didn't give up, even though they didn't see the results. Don't give up on people. Don't give up on one another. Don't give up. Don't give up. If you're leading a fuse group, don't give up on. It is discouraging at times. It is discouraging. Sometimes you run a group and it's like, wow, there should be 12 people here tonight, and 2 people have showed up. What the heck? Thanks, guys. You got to keep going. Commit and be consistent. I'm sorry it's awkward and it's personal, and it's going to interrupt what you've got going on in your lives, but it won't ever reap the benefit unless we are committed and consistent. Committed and consistent. And an athlete keeps going, and even when they don't yet see the results. Moving on, the next thing. An athlete plays by the rules, because Paul says you can't, you never win the prize by cheating, if you like, right? So an athlete plays by the rules, even when others cut corners, even when others cheat, even when others sort of try to do it a little bit differently. You don't cut corners. You really want to win the prize by not cheating. Don't cut corners. Don't cut corners. Don't cut corners. Keep going. Anyone who competes as an athlete doesn't receive the prize unless they compete according to the rules. Okay? No cheating allowed. Make sure you're running in the right direction. I mean, that's kind of an obvious one, right? Make sure what you're going for, you're running in the right direction. But no shortcuts. No shortcuts. I kind of wish I was so much more mature already. You'd think after nearly 50 years of living, I would have been a lot more mature. I'm working. God's working on it. Yeah. There's no shortcuts. This is growth. This is a process. God doesn't take shortcuts on you. He who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it until the end. And you know what? Sometimes it's going to take your entire life for him to just chip away at all those things in your heart, chip away at all that stuff in your mind, undo all those lies, unravel the things that you've had, heal the hurts, bind up the broken heart. It's not always instantly and immediate. He's a faithful God who is faithful to complete what he started, and he's not going to take a shortcut with you. And sometimes that means we don't like the middle bit because we wish it could happen quicker and we wish it could just happen sooner. And darn it, why don't you just move in and fix everything already? And he says, I'm not taking a shortcut. I'm going to do it properly and I'm going to do it right because I know the end from the beginning. I love you so much. I love you so much. I'm not going to cheat. I love you so much. I'm not going to cut a corner in your life. I love you so much that I'm in it from your first breath to your last breath. I am not giving up on you, and I'm going to see something change in you. I'm going to see you grow and become everything I have called you to be. I'm going to see you become everything that you have dreamed and maybe not even imagined that I have for you. I've got more than you can ever imagine, and I'm never going to cut a corner with you. I'm not cheating. I'm not going to cut corners, and so therefore, we want these shortcuts in life, but we don't get shortcuts. We shouldn't take shortcuts, rather. We want these shortcuts and we shouldn't take them. No cheating. An athlete competes and plays according to the rules. So we're not going to cut corners. We're not going to cheat with one another, hey? We got to keep going on. And the thing that makes this all work is God's grace. God's grace in our lives, poured out in our lives, and helps us have that for one another. Here's how it works. If you imagine an engine, and you've got gears, and they're grinding together. Now, an engine that doesn't have any grease in it, do you know what happens to the engine? Any mechanics in the room? If you don't have enough grease, seizes up. And the Holy Spirit, we need the grace, like grease, which helps everything work smoothly together. Function the way it's supposed to. Even though it's different types of parts, even though they shouldn't really work together in the way they do, there's this thing called grace which makes everything work together. Just like the grease in an engine makes it work together the way it should. And we can only achieve this. We can only achieve this carrying on, this holding on, this not taking shortcuts when we rely on the grace that God has given us and the grace for one another. Because like it or not, the last thing as we wrap up and think about church is a team sport. It's a team sport. It's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. And we're all athletes. We are athletes. And it's a team sport. And sometimes we can treat sports with more accountability and more seriousness than this stuff, faith and one another, and your team relies on you. If you're an athlete, you know this. Your team relies on you. Your team relies on you fulfilling that position. They rely on you being there. The team relies on you. They need enough people to make the team work. It's the same thing with the local church. We rely on one another to be effective in what we're supposed to be effective at, which is reaching the lost and helping those who are far from Jesus discover Jesus. We need one another. We need to be team sports. Team sport. It doesn't work without it. It's a team sport. No lone rangers. It's a team. It's a team sport. It's not only that you need it, but we need it. Your church relies on you, but you rely on your church. It's a cyclical thing, isn't it? It's like this. I don't know what it's called. It's some fancy science word, I'm sure. We need one another. That's what it is. Yeah, we need one another. I said last week that Paul never matured past the point of needing somebody else. Paul, this leader in the church community, this incredible guy who was like one of, if not the most influential people in the early church, never matured to the point where he no longer needed local community. He never did. I know it's trendy to kind of do your own thing and fashion it the way you like it, your own podcast, pick your own playlists. You can recreate it in your own image. You can make it to your own tastes. You can find only the people that tell you things that you like to hear. But Paul never matured past the point of local church. He didn't. Whatever expression that was. People in blue chairs in the middle of a North Hertfordshire, or people in a big room, or people in a house somewhere, whatever the expression is, he never matured past needing local community, local church community. He never got too smart that he never needed it. He never got so dependent that he never needed the other. He never got so fill in the blanks that he didn't need the other. It's a team sport. Your team relies on you. And there are another generation across the street that are relying on us. We're going to hand them the church. They're the church of the future, right? They're the church of now. We're passing the baton on. And they need us. They need us. We cannot walk away from it. So hey, closing up now, just going to wrap this all up. But think again, a local church. I know maybe you don't like the idea of church being inconvenient and hard work and all that kind of stuff. But this is what Paul's saying. Sometimes it is inconvenient. And we are like athletes working hard. I ask you to do this. Consider this. What does it mean for you to join the team? So you got to work out what that means for you. I'm going to trust the Holy Spirit to challenge you in your own setting, in your own environment, in your own culture. Maybe if you're not part of this church, or if you're, whatever that means for you, you need to think about what it means to join the team. Wherever you are, figure out how to get stuck in. Maybe it's a practical area of ministry. Maybe it's something like tech teams, helping out, stewarding, investing in the next generation. I don't know. Maybe there's a way for you to join a small group. I don't know what it is for you. I don't know. But decide and be consistent. And remember, an athlete will train hard, will keep going, and plays by the rules. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you so much for who you are. I thank you that you love us so much, that you modeled what it means to be an athlete who trained so hard, who gave everything, and it never cut corners. Thank you for that. You are the athlete who we follow. God, you are the one who led by example. And Jesus, help us to recognize that sometimes life is a bit of suffering, competing, and hard work. Help us not to give up. Help us know to have a purposeful pursuit and how to give our lives to something worth living for. God, I pray for everybody here this morning, wherever they're at, whether they're watching online or here in the room, God, we just pray that you would be with them. And I trust that you are so kind and good that you will lead them to help them know what their next step is, Father. You will help them know what it means to apply what they've learned today. In your name we pray. Amen. Have an amazing, awesome, incredible week. Now, you might have put the bits together. You could have figured out. As Paul said, a suffering soldier, competing athlete, hardworking farmer. So guess what we're talking about next week? Yeah, so bring your dungarees, bring, your milk buckets, bring your, no, cool. So we'll talk about some farming next week. Have an awesome week. If you've got some children and youth across the road, go and get them. Grab a drink, chat to some of us. If you have any questions, we'd love to chat to you. Awesome. Cheers.